For 150 years, American Standard has been the plumber's trusted partner, working together to bring your customers quality, value, and always a quick and easy installation for the #1 toilet brand. While our partnership hasn't changed, our appreciation continues to grow. And it's why we've enhanced our American Standard Plumber Rebate Program, which now gives you even more money back on projects large and small. Learn more at LixwellPlumberRebates.com.
You're listening to Campus Killings, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, Missing Persons, Beyond Bizarre True Crime, and Citizen Detective. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
Hi, Megan, and hello, listeners. Today's case takes us to the Samuel Merritt University in California. This was a listener request, and we're very excited to be covering our first nursing school on the show. Unfortunately, we don't know the name of the listener who requested this, but if you are listening, thank you so much for the lovely note. And we are so glad that you're finding the show binge-worthy. And thank you again for thinking of us with this suggestion. Megan, I think you're going to be very interested in this episode because it features somewhat of a love triangle.
You know how I like love triangles. I don't know why, but I do.
Before we get into the story, however, let's take a look at the university. In the 1880s, the highly respected Dr. Samuel Merritt, who had left his practice in Maine to join thousands of people moving out to California, gave an inheritance in his will to build a college specifically for the education and certification of nurses. While he passed away before ground was actually broken on the university that would eventually bear his name, the Samuel Merritt College opened its doors to students in 1909. Over the next 75 years, the college educated nurses, but was not a four-year institution, and they had to partner with other colleges in the area for their students to take foundational science courses and liberal arts classes. And it would remain this way until 1981, when the school reorganized to be a traditional four-year institution. However, they still only granted degrees in nursing and public health. In the early 2000s, the college expanded, gaining university status and creating 4 campuses across the state of California. And this would include locations in Sacramento, Fresno, San Francisco, and Oakland. Today, they offer degrees in 3 specific areas: nursing, health sciences, and podiatric nursing. They also affiliate with several hospitals around the state of California, and this allows their students a mostly hands-on clinical educational experience. And while we don't know exactly why graduate student Michelle Lay chose Samuel Merritt as her school, we do know that becoming a nurse practitioner had always been a dream of hers. Of Vietnamese descent, Michelle grew up with her parents and younger brother in San Diego, California. Michelle's mother unfortunately passed away from cancer in 1999, and her father moved the family to live with his sister, and this is where Michelle and her brother would grow up in a very large extended family with 15 cousins and many aunts and uncles. Michelle went on to attend Mount Carmel High School, where she was an excellent student, and here she would make a very special friend, a young woman by the name of Giselle Esteban. And these two shared a close bond. They became best friends throughout their high school years, with Giselle somewhat becoming a fixture in the Lay family. In fact, according to Michelle's cousin, Giselle was almost always around the Lay house, and Michelle and Giselle were more like sisters than best friends. Upon graduation, Michelle was headed to San Jose University, while Giselle went to San Francisco State. However, after only a year at San Jose, Michelle decided to transfer to San Francisco State. Now, it's unknown if this was because she wanted to go to the same school as Giselle or if she was just looking for a different university culture.
Right, okay.
But either way, Michelle would join Giselle at San Francisco State in 2003. Once there, Giselle introduced Michelle to a young man named Scott Marsgan. Now, Scott and Giselle had known each other since freshman year. And it's not clear if the introduction was because Giselle thought maybe the two would make a good couple, or if she was just trying to help integrate Michelle better as a transfer student. But either way, there was a romantic connection between Michelle and Scott, and they began dating soon after the introduction. The romance, however, was pretty short-lived, as only a month into the relationship, Michelle and Scott realized that they were better friends than partners. And as Scott would later testify, he and Michelle never had a physical relationship.
I'm sorry, so did you say really quickly, you said that they only dated for about a month?
Correct.
Okay. Very
Yes.
short.
And,
Okay.
and they were never physical.
Okay, yeah, got it. Okay.
They still had a lot in common, though, and they decided they would remain friends, so they would hang out platonically and keep in touch. After school, they went their ways, and Michelle, who had always wanted to be a nurse practitioner, since that's what her mother had done before she had passed away, she enrolled with Samuel Merritt to get her nurse practitioner license. Now, not long after Scott and Michelle broke up, Scott started dating Giselle, but right from the beginning, Giselle made it clear to Scott that she was uncomfortable with how close he and Michelle still seemed to be.
Because they were still good friends, Amy? Is that the situation?
Yeah, and both Michelle and Scott promised her that there was nothing romantic between them at all, and they were really just friends, but Giselle didn't really seem to take any comfort in their claims. But despite her worry, she kept dating Scott, and soon she became pregnant with his child in January of 2005.
Just so you know, Amy, I know this case now. I just wanted
do?
to let you know.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Let me guess, you saw the dateline?
That is absolutely correct. Yes, I did see the dateline.
All right, well, stick with me anyway.
Of course.
Unfortunately, her jealousy about Michelle and Scott's friendship only got worse as her pregnancy went on. She accused them of having sexual relations behind her back, and she began texting both Michelle and Scott with threats if they didn't stop talking to each other. And things would only escalate after she gave birth to a daughter in late October of 2005.
This is such a shame, too, because the girls were friends way preceding the relationships. But I wonder if they had always had jealousy in the friendship, like if Giselle had, jealousy early on or insecurities. Because I would find it hard to believe with a friendship that long that all of a sudden she is, so bothered. Although I can say that pregnancy does make you, speaking as someone recent, hormonal, but still, I think there's something much deeper going on here.
Yes, and remember, Giselle was jealous before her pregnancy, but yes, it just heightened things for her once that happened.
Okay.
About a year after his daughter's birth, Scott could no longer handle Giselle's jealousy, and he broke off their relationship. And this would go on to create a tense custody battle between him and Giselle that lasted the better part of 2 years.
Oy. That's awful.
In 2008, Giselle won full custody, and she moved out of the Bay Area to keep their daughter away from Scott. However, he was able to obtain an 80% custody agreement of his daughter not long after, and this would force Giselle to move back to the Bay Area in the summer of 2010.
Whoa, that's weird. She got full custody and he got 80%. Something else going on here, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Giselle and Scott's relationship also became complicated around this time as the pair began sleeping together on and off, though they weren't officially back together. Now, Giselle would later claim this is because she was lonely, but who knows if there were still feelings there. Regardless, this is a volatile relationship.
And a recipe
for sure.
for disaster.
Yes. And as far as we know from Scott's later testimony, Scott had still never had an intimate relationship with Michelle at all. Now, they did keep in contact and they were platonic, but neither had any interest in dating the other, and they continued to tell Giselle so. Now, Michelle also had a boyfriend at this time. So these two are not interested in each other, and she was also dating someone else.
Okay.
And with the custody of her daughter at stake, Giselle agreed to attend a high-conflict parenting class in which she, Scott, and Michelle came together to try to resolve the supposed love triangle. Now, this seems kind of bizarre for me why Michelle was brought into this parenting, high-conflict parenting class. But regardless, she was there, I guess maybe because they were more like family, it seems.
Okay.
Unfortunately, this class had the opposite effect because they only seemed to solidify for Giselle that Michelle and Scott were having a physical relationship behind her back, and she doubled down on her verbal abuse. At one point around this time, she sent Michelle the following text, quote, "If you were really anybody's friend, mine or Scott's, you would just fuck off and leave my family alone. But all you are is the whore who had nothing better to do and followed me to San Francisco. That's all you will ever be. The whore who slept with other people's men and brothers because no one wanted you. You aren't my friend. You are always just a parasite."
Whoa. This does not sound like two people who were very close friends to me.
No. And she also sent tons of texts to Scott as well, claiming that if he didn't cut Michelle out of his life for good, quote, the punishment would be swift. She also told Scott both in person and through text that he and Michelle both deserved to die for what they were putting her through.
Does she have any diagnosed mental illness? Because this almost sounds as well like it went from jealousy to like
Paranoia?
Yeah, to paranoia and possibly delusion. Like I don't know. It almost feels like it's bordering on like some type of psychosis with the way it escalated.
Yeah, at this point, I'm not aware of any diagnoses. Okay. And it wasn't just verbal abuse. At one point, Giselle threw hot coffee on Scott's lap when he refused to keep talking about her allegations that he was cheating on her. And by 2011, only 6 months after Giselle moved back to the Bay Area, the behavior started escalating even more. Between February and March of 2011, she sent Scott the following text, quote, "You can't protect anyone. Your whore will get what she deserves." Another one, quote, "Get rid of your whore. Block her out. Otherwise, you bring your own hell on you and all you love." Next one, quote, "I was loving and open and took care of you and Michelle, and you two lied to me. It's only fitting that you pay for your mistake. So will she." And the last and most chilling was, quote, "Michelle has dug her own grave by being a homewrecker and a whore. She won't be an issue for us much longer. FYI, she won't pass her midterms."
Oh my gosh.
I mean, these are extremely threatening.
Very.
And I would hope that if anyone receives texts like this, they just go straight to authorities.
I think so.
Because this is clearly a situation that is, getting to a boiling point. At one point during a heated argument in the car, Scott began secretly recording Giselle as she threatened that she would kill him and Michelle, as he was starting to fear that she might actually do something violent. In fact, on the heels of this argument, Scott later recalled waking up in the middle of the night to hear his car alarm going off, then finding Giselle in his apartment. She had broken in and was going through documents on his computer.
Oh my gosh.
Terrified for his daughter's safety at this point and fearing that Giselle would kidnap her or worse, Scott filed a temporary restraining order against Giselle in mid-May of 2011. But the order only kept Giselle from contacting Scott or their daughter. There was nothing in there to keep Giselle away from the person that she hated the most.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors.
On May 27th of 2011, Michelle was only 6 months away from getting her practitioner's license, and she was in the middle of her clinical rounds at Kaiser Medical Center's maternity ward. Around 6:45 p.m., Michelle left the ward to take her scheduled 15-minute break. She told one of her fellow students that she would be right back. She just needed to get something from her car. But she never came back. At 7 p.m., a hospital security guard noticed that Michelle hadn't signed out of her shift. So at this point, he alerted her professor, NP Lori Rosa, about Michelle not returning after her 15-minute break. Now, everyone agreed that this was very unlike Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
She was always very reliable, and she would never have just left a shift without alerting anyone.
Right.
The NP tried calling Michelle's phone, but nobody picked up, which was also very strange. Around 7:30 that same night, a nurse in the emergency department received a call from a Michelle Lay, who asked if a message could be patched through to NP Rosa, saying that Michelle had just gotten word that her father had had a heart attack and she would not be able to finish her shift. According to later interviews, Rosa immediately felt that something was wrong. Why hadn't Michelle just called her personally? She had her phone number, so there was no reason why she would have called the emergency room. If anything, why wouldn't she have alerted the maternity ward where she actually worked?
Mm-hmm. Right.
A few other things were strange. Michelle had left her purse in the staff room on the ward. Now, wouldn't she have come back in to retrieve it if, in fact, she was having a family emergency? The only thing she had taken out to her car were her phone and her keys. By the time of the emergency room phone message, an hour and a half had passed since Michelle had left for her break. So with a feeling of dread in her stomach, the NP asked the security guard to accompany her to the parking garage to see if they could find Michelle. And while they did see her white Honda CR-V driving back into the parking garage, as if it had gone somewhere, Rosa would later testify that as soon as the Honda spotted herself and the security guard, the Honda quickly reversed and sped off.
Amy, could they see who was driving the car?
That's a good question, but unfortunately, because of the glare from the garage lights, neither Rosa or the security guard were able to determine who the driver was of the vehicle. Rosa then tried contacting Michelle several more times to no avail. And after calling Michelle's family and finding out that her father was not having a heart attack and that there was no emergency, a missing persons report was filed with Heyward Police Department.
I'm glad they got on that immediately.
Yes, and of course we've seen in many other cases that sometimes these reports are not taken seriously.
Right.
But I'm happy to report that in this case, the Heyward police took Michelle's disappearance very seriously, and they opened up an investigation immediately. In fact, the very same day, the lead detective both called and texted Michelle's cell phone to see if he would get an answer. And to his surprise, he did. The text reply said, quote, "I have low battery. I have to find a charger to call you back." Her family had also received some similar texts when they had reached out to her over the course of the 12 hours. And they claimed that this wasn't something Michelle would have said. Some other texts her family had received said things like, "I just needed some time alone," or "I'm sick right now," or "I just don't want to talk to people." None of these texts were indicative of Michelle. Her family described her as a warm, inviting, and happy person who was extremely close with her family, and she wouldn't have brushed them off like that. Now, these strange messages would continue for 2 more days. And at this point, Michelle's brother told police that he believed that somebody had stolen Michelle's phone and was pretending to be her. So they started thinking that perhaps she had been abducted, and her family worried that maybe she had been human trafficked or kidnapped by someone.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly, like, families recognize whoever perpetrates these crimes takes the phone and thinks they're going to throw off the family by these messages. And I guess sometimes it works, but, people who know their loved ones, especially with a reliable person like Michelle, are aware that she's not just going to go missing and not respond.
Yep. And there was a reason why they had some of these fears about her being human trafficked or kidnapped, because there was another young Asian woman who had been abducted from the Bay Area only a few months prior to Michelle's disappearance. However, it wouldn't be long before police got a very good tip in one of their interviews. Scott was very vocal to police about his strained relationship with the mother of his child, Giselle Esteban, and about Giselle's jealousy about his friendship with Michelle. So, not surprisingly, investigators were very interested to talk to Giselle. And Giselle didn't hold back in her interview. She proclaimed that Michelle had slept with her fiancé, Scott, and she told them she felt very betrayed, and she asked them, how could her best friend do something so horrible to her? Also, side note, at the time of this meeting, Giselle was also pregnant with her second child.
Oh, God.
Now, whose baby was this? I don't know. It could have been Scott's. It could have been somebody else's. There were some reports that said that she was trying to get back at Scott, so she started dating a lot. But it's unknown who the father was of this child.
Okay.
Giselle also told police that she had run into Michelle at the Kaiser Medical Center recently because she had been going there for her prenatal checkups. Giselle claimed that she didn't know Michelle was working at the hospital, and so she had been pretty angry when she saw her. She said it was an unwanted surprise because their relationship was so strained. Now, the strange thing is that police had interviewed Michelle's family, and Michelle's family didn't seem to know anything about Giselle's anger at Michelle. Scott had been the only one to express this. Now, the Lay family claimed that the two women had been as close as sisters since high school, and that not that long ago, Michelle had actually gone to several counseling sessions with Giselle because she was having some issues. And furthermore, they found Giselle's claims that Michelle and Scott were intimate to be absolutely preposterous. As I mentioned, Michelle had a boyfriend, and while she and Scott did meet for lunch sometimes and texted, Michelle had a wide circle of friends, and no one would describe Scott as even one of her closest friends. So while police found Giselle's credibility about mysteriously running into her mortal enemy at the hospital to be pretty suspicious, it also didn't seem plausible that a petite 4'11" pregnant woman could have done anything to harm or abduct the much taller Michelle.
Yeah, I understand that, right?
But we've seen cases where people are able to harm people much larger than them in various ways.
Well, yeah, of course. There's also the, we've talked about in our other podcast, blitz attacks, element of surprise. Someone gets knocked from behind. But I do understand that that's probably one of the challenges in this case here, seeing that.
At this early stage, there was a lot of hope that Michelle was still alive somewhere, and her family truly thought that she had been kidnapped and just needed to be rescued. While investigators were conducting interviews and obtaining the warrants for Michelle's phone records to track her movements, her family and friends launched enormous searches to try to bring her home. These searches were mostly spearheaded by her brother and her cousin. The Lay family printed thousands of flyers and hung them all around the Bay Area, and they held several publicized vigils to bring awareness to her case. Get this, they even took out billboards along major highways with a large photo of Michelle advertising a $65,000 reward for Michelle's safe return.
Wow. Well, they want their family, they want their daughter, they want their sister, they want their family member back.
And as we know, because we both heard about this case while it was happening, the search got a lot of media attention.
Yes.
Local radio stations all shared the news about Michelle's disappearance, urging their followers to, quote, see something, say something. And Megan, we're on the East Coast, and we heard about this case as it was unfolding.
Yep.
So this was, this was all over. It wasn't just local news. The family received a ton of support from the Class Kids Foundation, whose mission is to assist in the recovery of missing persons. The owner of Class Kids, Mark Class, actually came out himself to assist the Lay family in the searches. And he was really intrinsic to the family's morale, as the police were keeping a lot of the information about Michelle's case confidential.
This isn't our first case where the Class Foundation has been involved. I've covered cases as well where a polyclass father and the foundation was involved.
I actually thought you were going to say this isn't the first time that we had a case like this where the police were keeping information about the case confidential. And as we see, this upsets family members because they feel like they're being kept in the dark. And they also feel like the police aren't taking the case seriously, when oftentimes it's just to protect the integrity of the investigation. Now, Mark was able to reinstate good relations between the Lay family and the lead investigators, who shared information about cell phone pings in order to give the family an idea about where to start searching. But those 7 massive searches were done of the Bay Area by Michelle's family, friends, and the community over the course of 4 months, no one was able to find any trace of her.
We'll return after a brief word from our sponsors.
In the meantime, police were doing all they could from an investigative standpoint, and they were able to obtain quite a bit of evidence very quickly. Only one day after Michelle's disappearance, investigators found her white Honda CR-V abandoned in a neighborhood about 1.5 miles away from the hospital. More so, inside the car, they recovered blood stains as well as finding blood near Michelle's parking spot in the hospital's parking garage. CCTV footage from the hospital showed Michelle exiting the medical center at 6:47 p.m. This was the beginning of her break. And walking out to the parking garage with her keys and cell phone. But no footage ever showed her reapproaching the entrances. So it seems like there was CCTV, but unfortunately it only covered the entrances, not the whole parking garage. They also pulled CCTV footage from Merritt University since Michelle had gone to class before attending her clinicals. And guess who they found on the university CCTV?
Well, I'm not going to be surprised when they see Giselle on there.
Oh yeah, not only do they see Giselle on the university surveillance, they see her accessing the campus via an ID badge and wearing what looked like a medical white coat.
Wow. It's a level of premeditation there and planning.
And in other videos, she's seen in a classroom, and it appears that she's turning on the computers in the room. She was also holding what looked like a printout of a student roster sheet with student photographs and class information. And I think the reason why this is the most curious is because, in case we're not following here, she's not a student at that university.
Amy, one thing I don't remember, and maybe you could explain, do we know how she got the ID badge?
Yeah, well, actually we do, because during the investigation, they interviewed some of the university staff, and it was revealed that only one day before Michelle disappeared, Giselle had called Merritt and made an appointment with their student services department to have a potential new student interview. And after Giselle left that meeting, the administrative assistant noticed that one of the faculty badges that had been on her desk, waiting for a new faculty member to come pick up, had gone missing. So
that's
clearly
chilling.
Giselle had stolen it and used it to access faculty-only sections of the campus where she was able to obtain a class roster. And I think we can all extrapolate why she was trying to get this roster.
This is not looking good for her.
They also found out some more information after interviewing hospital staff. A woman had called the hospital front desk several times over the course of a few days, inquiring about Michelle's work schedule and when she would be in next. CCTV footage also showed Giselle in the hospital's parking garage both before and after Michelle's disappearance. And when Michelle's cell phone records came back, investigators saw that her phone pinged off several cell towers not near the hospital the day after she disappeared. And in tracking these pings, police found CCTV footage of Giselle at an iPhone store where they later learned that she had come in claiming that her daughter had accidentally put a passcode on her phone and she needed it broken. And an unsuspecting Apple technician took care of it for her.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Other pings led to CCTV footage of her at a Chuck E. Cheese with her daughter a few hours later, texting on what appeared to be Michelle's phone.
Mm-hmm. No surprise there.
Yeah, so this missing persons case had become a potential homicide, and police had enough evidence to peg Giselle as a viable suspect. Now, of course, they just needed some DNA. About a week into the investigation, police knocked on Giselle's door saying that they had some follow-up questions and they were hoping that Giselle might be able to help them in locating Michelle. Giselle told them that she'd actually just reached out to Michelle earlier that day to remind her to stay away from her daughter. But when police asked if they could see proof of the conversation to help them find Michelle, Giselle answered that her texts to Michelle were automatically deleted.
Jeez, okay.
She was served a search warrant for her computer and phone, as well as the clothes she had been wearing the day Michelle disappeared, along with a DNA sample. Now, back at headquarters, a full forensic sweep of Michelle's CRV had been completed, and all the swabs were sent out for testing. I don't think you'll be surprised to know that several weeks later, when the test came back from the lab, Giselle's DNA was found inside Michelle's car.
No surprise
now,
there.
Her DNA was found on the steering wheel and the turn signal, along with several of Giselle's hairs found throughout the vehicle.
How did she? It's always surprising to me that she thought she could pull this off.
Well, wait till you hear what she's trying to go for at trial.
I vaguely remember
I think
something.
It gets more shocking.
Yeah, something okay. Almost ridiculous, but okay.
At this time, investigators were also able to conclude that the blood splatter in the car and in the parking garage belonged to Michelle. And Michelle's blood was also found on a pair of shoes that Giselle had been wearing the day of Michelle's disappearance. And as if that wasn't enough, Giselle's computer also revealed over 300 searches for information on Michelle's whereabouts, as well as several searches for topics like how to cause a heart attack without leaving evidence, how to break doors, locks, and deadbolts, and highly toxic gases like carbon monoxide and potassium chloride.
Whoa.
How many cases do we have to cover? How do people not realize that the police can see your searches even if they are deleted?
I don't know. I find it very bizarre. I'm not kidding. I find this super bizarre.
And there's more, because Giselle's cell phone GPS matched all of the coordinates as Michelle's phone records, meaning that both women's phones were traveling together on the night of Michelle's disappearance.
Right.
Giselle's cell phone also revealed that about 3 hours after Michelle went missing, Giselle texted a friend asking how to unlock someone's phone.
Oh, my gosh.
And on top of all of this, about 3 months into the investigation, Scott contacted police to say that he had found Michelle's phone in the backseat of his car after Giselle had been spotted in his driveway. So I don't know if she was trying to frame him or what happened here, but
I was going to ask if the police, I wonder at some point they had to think that he was potentially a suspect as well. I'm sure they were able to rule him out. It doesn't sound like he was involved, but I have to imagine he came under the microscope as well.
Yeah, I don't have much information about that, but yeah, I would bet that is the case.
And then when and then I'm assuming he reports to the police that her phone is in his car, which is of course the right thing to do, but it doesn't probably look good for him then, poor guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this evidence against Giselle is overwhelming, even without that cell phone being in Scott's car. And she was arrested for the murder of Michelle Lay in August of 2011. But investigators were still missing one very important piece of evidence. They didn't have Michelle's body.
Yes.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors.
They don't have her body. And I mean, I will say this. It's interesting what this woman would have done with her remains. I don't remember if they found her remains, but I know you'll get there. So
Yes, I will tell you.
Okay.
About 10 days after Giselle's arrest and a total of 4 months since the disappearance, Michelle's family sent out one final desperate search party to see if they could locate Michelle's body. For this search, Mark Klass brought in the leader of another missing persons organization, Carrie McCongle of Team Amber Rescue, and her cadaver dog. In an area off a dirt path in a nearby canyon, Carrie's dog alerted, and not long after, Carrie found a piece of old rope next to a badly decomposed human body. And though it was not physically possible to tell if the body was Michelle's right away, or even if it was a woman, for that matter, investigators were fairly convinced, as the cell phone records from both Michelle and Giselle showed that they had both traveled to this area together on that May evening.
Wow, I do remember this now. That was unbelievable that they found her then. I do recall this. Thank God.
A few days later, dental records confirmed the body was in fact Michelle's. But because it was mostly just bones by this point, the medical examiner was unable to determine the exact cause of death. And Giselle wasn't talking at this point. For her part, Giselle pled not guilty and opted to go on to trial, with her defense team making repeated requests for continuations on the count that Giselle was pregnant. Now, I don't know what kind of plea deal they had offered. I couldn't find that information anywhere, but all we know is that she was not taking whatever they were offering.
Right.
Now, there were several months of delays, but eventually a judge ruled that there could be no more delays regardless of Giselle's pregnancy. And on September 17th of 2012, Giselle Esteban's trial began. And this would be a difficult road for the prosecution because they don't have a definitive method of murder. Right? They did have a lot of evidence, but without a cause of death, this was going to be a little difficult. Again, trying to convince a jury that this petite woman before them was capable of murdering her former best friend in a parking lot and then driving her body to a remote canyon to dump it, it seems kind of difficult without a method or an accomplice.
Yeah, but they have a lot. I mean, they have a lot of evidence. I do understand. It is hard to, but they have so much evidence.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think because they had so much evidence, the prosecution was shocked when the defense got up and did not claim that Giselle was innocent. In fact, the defense fully admitted that she had killed Michelle. However, they offered an alternative to the jury. They said that Michelle had provoked Giselle to murder her by stealing Scott, putting a strain on her romantic relationship, and ultimately leading her to lose custody of her daughter due to Scott's restraining order, which had been brought on by his and Michelle's, quote, secret relationship, and this caused Giselle to snap in a crime of passion.
Okay. Wow.
I mean, so basically the defense was asking the jury to find Giselle guilty of manslaughter.
Yes.
Because that would only carry a max sentence of 9 years, which is very different than if she got a first-degree charge.
Well, I mean, this sounds ridiculous, but we've talked about this in other episodes and other cases. Defense has to do something, right? And what are they going to do here? They really can't go for outright, she didn't do it. There's just too much evidence. So they work with what they have, right?
Yeah, they couldn't go insanity because there's no evidence of that. So yeah, you're right. They have to do something.
Yeah.
But again, the prosecution had their mountain of evidence. And despite not being able to prove a particular method of murder, what was clear based on both the DNA and the digital findings was that Giselle had taken premeditated steps to kill her old friend.
Oh, yeah.
This was clearly not a crime of passion, as the defense was arguing. I mean, based on the web searches and the stalking, Giselle had spent months trying to set up a way to get rid of Michelle. And what I find interesting in this case is Giselle did not testify. I'm not saying it would have helped her if she did, but I think if you're going to make this kind of claim, I think you probably do need your defendant to testify.
Yeah,
I know that's never a good idea, but
I think it would have been a terrible idea with her, but you're right. Like, it's how do you make the claim without her testifying? But if they put her up there, she would have been a disaster. I could already tell.
Mm-hmm. In his closing arguments, prosecutor Butch Ford called Giselle a sociopath, describing her method as, quote, a well-thought-out, calculated attack on an unprepared target. But while the evidence seemed like a slam-dunk case, both Prosecutor Ford and the Lay family began to worry when the jury was deliberating for over 5 days.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, there's no acquittal on the table. So the jury could either charge Giselle with first-degree murder or first-degree manslaughter. Again, the latter charge meaning that Giselle would be free to go on with her life after only a 9-year minimum. And for the family, that would not be justice for their loved one.
Whoa, that's surprising.
As the jury emerged on the 6th day with their final verdict, the 25 members of the Lay family, including Michelle's father and brother, several cousins, aunts, and uncles, they all held hands as the jurors took their seats. They declared Giselle Esteban guilty of first-degree murder. Michelle's brother and cousin later told Dateline that they immediately started crying at the verdict because for them, Michelle would have justice.
I wonder what took them so long. So interesting.
It is interesting. It seems like the evidence was pretty strong for a first-degree murder charge.
I thought so, yeah. Maybe they just had sympathy. We've talked about this on Women in Crime. She's a female, pregnant, child.
She's pregnant,
yeah.
Yep. On December 10th of 2012, Giselle was sentenced to 25 years to life, and the family were able to read their victim impact statements. Michelle's brother Michael said to Giselle, quote, "You took an innocent life because of an overactive imagination. I feel broken and utterly incomplete without Michelle, and I miss my sister so much." Her cousin Christine also spoke, citing that Giselle had taken away the closest thing Christine ever had to a big sister, and that Michelle had been, quote, joyful, carefree, lighthearted, and beautiful inside and out. According to several reporters, Giselle showed no remorse during the victim impact statements, only looking straight ahead while the family read their letters, and she made no public statements of her own. And actually, as far as I could find, Giselle never publicly apologized to the family or shown any public display of remorse for Michelle's murder.
Right.
And despite the conviction and the justice it brought, the Lay family is still left with questions about why Giselle killed Michelle. In her interview with Dateline, Christine said she still doesn't understand how it happened. The two had been such good friends, and Christine claimed that Michelle had even texted Giselle not long before the murder saying, quote, "I will always be your friend." And for Michelle's brother, Michael, moving on without his sister remains very difficult. He told Dateline that after their mother had passed away back in 1999, Michelle really became his surrogate mom. And to have lost both his actual mom and the sister who became his mom is something that he feels he'll never truly overcome.
Such a heartbreaking case. They all are, but really, she seemed like such a wonderful person. Oh, God. I mean, her only misfortune was becoming friends with this woman.
I know. And they were friends for a long time. It's not like this was a new friend. So, like, the betrayal is just...
I know.
It's hard to understand how this happened.
Yeah.
While there are no plaques or scholarships in Michelle's name at Samuel Merritt University or the hospital she was working for, there is one poignant legacy in Michelle's honor. Both her brother Michael and her cousin Christine had joined the Class Kids Foundation, and they spend their time helping other families find their missing loved ones. Both Michael and Christine have said that it's the best way for them to keep Michelle's memory alive, to give back to an organization that was so intrinsic in finding Michelle's body so that she could have justice. But while Giselle Esteban will most likely spend the rest of her life in a California prison, the fact remains that whatever talents and skills Michelle would have brought to the world can never be gotten back. Future patients will never be treated by her. Any medical breakthroughs that she may have made will never be known. And from her family's perspective, they will never get to hug her again or listen to her laugh. Michelle was killed because somebody else was jealous of her life or the life that they thought she had. And while justice was served, Michelle's murder is a true tragedy.
Amy, I think one of the things that when we cover these cases, we focus on the one loss, right? And one of the things I learned from this case, and some others like it, is the ripple effect. So the victimization is not just one person. It's an entire family. Then you have to look at the family of the offender. Giselle's family didn't deserve that either. Like you said, her children, her ex, Scott, all of these people have to live with this senseless tragedy. So there's no real way to underscore how impactful one crime can be on an entire family and then really on an entire community. And that's something I don't know that we always are able to impart. But I think in this case, you probably did a good job of showing how it's not really just about one person. It's about so much more than that.
Yes. And also, I think another takeaway here is, when you're experiencing abuse from a former partner, it's important to take those threats seriously because there were a lot of red flags. And this was escalation. This was an escalation of behavior by Giselle. I'm not saying it was anyone's fault.
No.
But I hope that we can all learn from this to, say something. If someone is making these types of threats, assume that they're real.
I think that's a really good point, Amy. It's definitely a warning. I think this one is definitely a warning.
Before we go today, if you'd like to support Campus Killings, consider subscribing to the show with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcasts.
Your subscription will get you VIP access to all the shows on the network that not only includes hundreds of episodes of ad-free listening, but also bonus content and early access to episodes.
For only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, you'll unlock a variety of listener benefits, and you'll be supporting this show in the process.
Head over to Apple Podcasts and search for either Campus Killings or AbJack, and you can start your subscription with a free trial.
Your support is greatly appreciated.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode of Campus Killings.
Campus Killings is hosted by Dr. Megan Sachs and Dr. Amy Schlossberg, with research and writing by Abigail Belcastro. It's produced by Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to follow Campus Killings on social media. You can find Campus Killings on Twitter with the handle @CampusKillings or on Facebook at facebook.com/CampusKillings. You can also visit the show's homepage at campuskillings.com. Be sure to tune in every other Saturday for new episodes of Campus Killings.